Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power. Um, I'm trying to I'm
Is
trying to
is
find.
is it a show?
It's a show. It's a show. It's a
Yeah.
show that is I think I mentioned when I was talking to she. I don't hate it. It's not. It doesn't. It's not like Titans where I actively watch it and I go, I don't want to be watching this. Why am I watching this? Um, but I'm also not really invested in it. I'm kind of just like, okay, come on, something happened, something happened. I will say that I audibly gasped at the end of the last this latest episode, because the whole episode builds to this big escape that the elves are going to make from the orcs, and they just got to get one person out. One person has got to get out and get back to. I don't even know where. See, this is the other problem with this show. I don't even know where the guy was going to go. He's got to get back to the elf base, for lack of a better way to put it. And then the elves will come back and free them all and take care of the work problem. But and the dude escapes and he gets to the top and he just gets drilled by arrows, and like that one glimmer of hope just gets snuffed out. That one flame of hope gets snuffed out in an instant. I thought that was a pretty shocking little turn of events there at the end. Um, so it
I
has
actually
moments.
didn't see that coming, to be honest with you.
I didn't either. It has
I'll give it
like I
that.
it has moments where it's like, okay, that they executed that very well. That whole build up to to the end, and then the whole execution of him turning and you seeing the arrow in his chest and realizing that this kind of like little battle that they've just had to try and get somebody free, and the people that died all just died for nothing, was executed very well. The Harfoot stuff, I couldn't care less about. I don't even understand the logistics of, like, not the logistics. I don't understand the politics of it. Like, there seemed to be a huge issue with this the young girl and her family being pushed to the back, and there seemed to be a huge issue with whether or not her dad could even travel, and like there seemed to be a lot going on there that I was just like, I don't understand this aspect of it. I don't really care about these aspects of it. Like, I don't. I feel like this. You're playing this up as if these are major things that are happening, but they have no. There's no weight to them. There's nothing. You have not invested us in these characters or this this race at this point to for us to care that these things are happening, at least in my opinion, to care that these things are happening. So that all kind of, I just try and get through the Harfoot stuff.
That's the weird thing is I actually, as I keep clicking on the wrong I actually like the characters of like the Harfoots themselves. I like what I like them. The
Sure.
problem this show has right now, they haven't told us what the fucking actual plot is. Still,
Yeah.
4 episodes in, as someone who has no idea what the second age is, I can't imagine what they're sitting through right now. Because the only reason I've been doing homework, ladies and gentlemen. I've been watching there's a channel out there, and I'm gonna name drop them right now. Nerd of the Rings. You want some good Lord of the Rings lore content? Go watch Nerd of the Rings because I started watching just tons and tons of his videos from the third age, from the first age, from the second age, everything. Because like the show's not giving me the information that I need to understand what's going on. And that is the inherent problem with the Rings of Power show. Everything you see on screen is beautiful. It looks great. Like, dude, like this stuff looks amazing. Like all this big wide shot that they had coming in to Numendor. Like, dude, this stuff looks great. It looks amazing. The show has got so much potential. And honestly, me as someone who prior to this show coming out had not gone out. I've never read the books. Didn't care. Don't at me about it. Didn't want to read them. There's too much out there. Didn't want to get into it. Too confusing. Didn't want to do it. But the show is promised 4 or 5 seasons of this stuff. And because of the money that is backing this show, I'm interested in where it's going to go. I'm interested in what they can actually do. They're capable of doing a lot of good stuff. As someone who is familiar with the lore in general but never read the books, I knew what the potential was for the show. I knew about the Second Age. I wouldn't be able to name, you know, the Numenorians, and there's Dark Numenorians after this, and there's going to be a spoiler alert, like bad stuff happens to these people that were introduced here, and I know all this stuff. But like, I wouldn't have been able to name you, or like, freaking Elrond's brother and all this. I wouldn't be able to tell you that until like I didn't care. All right, it wasn't something I was trying to get into. But like this show and the potential the show has made me want to become invested. The problem is I had to do so through a third party. The show is not getting me invested. I'm being invested by the production value of the show, but the show isn't telling me why I should care. They've made Galadriel be a pretty annoying character. And oh my god, the horse scene. Did the horse scene stick out to you, John?
It did.
Dude, that was just, oh my god, I gotta pull it up. I gotta pull it up. You tell me what you thought about the horse scene while I pull up the horse scene, because oh my god, that annoyed me so much. What did you think of the horse scene?
It was just very it seemed very out of place, just very, like, I don't know, it just seemed like they wanted to do something pretty or something, I don't know, it was weird, I don't know. I
Dude,
don't have a lot of good
why does anybody care about this? In no way have we been teased that Galadriel has some affection to riding horses. There's nothing in like we had never even seen her riding a horse.
the only
We had no way of caring whether or not this would be an emotional moment for the character. There's nothing in the books that even suggests that this is an emotional moment for the character. It's just such a waste of fucking time.
the only thing I thought of why this was thrown in there was to there, right there, this is the only reason it was thrown in, is because she smiles. This character has not smiled at all through the entire first 4 episodes besides this scene. And so that's the only thing, is to show the audience that she can be
It's a
happy
good point.
at some point.
Okay, no, that's a good point. But the way it was portrayed, even
Yeah.
left not that I'm some fucking high authority on anything, but, like, I'm sitting and I've heard other people call out this scene. There are thumbnails already out there with people talking shit about this scene. I'm not the only one. But when I saw this, and because one of the big complaints I've had with this show, like, in all honesty, they've just been dragging the shit out. They've been hanging on to scenes for like, dude, like, we talked about this last week. Those big wide shots on the wide shot I had up earlier when they're going into Numenor or whatever the fuck it's called, and you're seeing just like the grandiose, massive city and these amazing, this is just great looking wide shot of Numenor, right? That's good. I'm fine with that. But like you're hanging on like this scene this was 30 seconds too long minimum.
Mhm.
So it's like you're killing a minute of screen time on something that like just no one cares about. And I feel like this isn't the only scene that's happened in by any means. It's just like this is the one that just comes to my like immediately as soon as this happened. I'm just like, why are we still hanging on here?
You
We
know,
needed 2 shots to establish that her and L whatever Isildur's dad is they're traveling to their destination. Couple shots of them on horseback, and the scene. No, we hung on to this. We showed slow-mo shots of the horse and slow-mo shots of Galadriel's clothes. whoa, in the wind. It's like, get to the fucking point. Because I
I
still don't
wonder
know the point.
I wonder if back in the day, all network television shows, even dramas, used to be hour long and you'd have 22 episodes a year. And then HBO kind of broke, I think it was HBO that maybe did it first, kind of broke the mold and started doing shorter, like 10 or 13 episode seasons. And your story, when you trimmed all that fat and you got down to just the story, the series became so much better. Like you would find that these series were just so much better when you trimmed the fat and didn't have all these filler things thrown in there. I feel like these episodes would do well with an editor that would trim the fat. Like you said, trim out 30 seconds of the horse riding, trim out even if it's 2 seconds of lingering on shots like this that just break the momentum of the show up. Um, I think you know, if you drop maybe 5 or 10, I don't know if they're trying intentionally to get to that hour mark. I think we talked about this last week. If they're trying to emulate the Game of Thrones runtimes so much that because they think that's what fantasy needs to be, but I feel like they're definitely lingering on things and scenes and different parts of the show are going on too long, almost just as an artificial way to expand the episodes.
Dude, I gotta say, I paused it on this scene just because his eyes looked really funny to me. But Eleanor here is like, I think his name's something along the lines of, it's not Eleanor pronounced like a girl's name, Eleanor, but it's something along those lines in like Elvish Tolkien speak. I don't know what. It's Isildur's dad. He's honestly, he's my favorite character at this point.
Yeah,
And it's just because we got to know him as a character. We got to know his motivations. I actually spent time with him a little bit. Like, because we're introduced to him on the boat and he seems like he's one way, right? And this is all prior to me. Like, now I know, like I said, I spent a lot of time watching a lot of Nerd of the Rings videos. So I know everything that's going to happen. I know it all. Can I remember the names? No. And that's why I didn't want to read the fucking books because there's just too much. There's too much stuff. But nevertheless, he ends up being a standout character in this because they spent time with him. Like, they didn't spend a shit ton of time with him, but they got to the point with his character. They showed him on the boat when we are first introduced to him being one way, right? Like, you think that he's gonna be a bad, like, oh, this is bad news for Galadriel, this character we're, keep in mind, supposed to like, but they have not given us any reason to really care about the character Galadriel in this show. You can read the books and know what the character is supposed to do, which, again, not really again, I haven't said it for this, but like, I totally get why someone who is a pure book reader, who is super invested in Tolkien lore, after doing a lot more research into this, I can totally see why people don't like the show. Don't get me wrong. But from someone who initially approached this show as someone who really had only seen the movies and then done very little research outside of the movies to understand what the greater lore meant, the show was even boring for me because they're not getting to the point. They're not telling their story in a very compelling way. Because still, after 4 hours of watching this, you still don't know where it's going. You still don't know. You've just been introduced to characters moving throughout the world, getting put into certain situations, and you have no idea how any of these characters will eventually become intertwined. You have no idea where it's all going. You don't know why the you don't even know why the orcs are doing what they're doing. Like, I'm sure, like, dude, did that because this happened to me. What did you think about the orcs being hurt by sunlight as someone not invested in the Tolkien lore? Did that stand
well,
out to you in any way?
I mean, when they said that, I was like, that's odd. I didn't remember that from the movies, but I also it's been a while. Maybe I forgot. I don't know.
No,
But
you wouldn't because traditional orcs, like they are orcs. They are orcs. In the movies, we were introduced to Urukai, and Urukai are a big deal because they are not affected by the sunlight. So, to the detractor of the movies even, they didn't explain that either. But so someone who did not read the books would have no idea of what the importance of the Urukai were during the Third Age, which is the Lord of the Rings films and those stories. When you just watch the movies, you're just sitting there like, "Oh, cool, these people are making orcs," and you just think that that's how orcs were made, right?
Yeah.
And this is the problem that the show has, I think, in a lot of ways, is like everyone who made the show. This is honestly kind of a very weird disconnect too, because I feel like one thing that this show has a very competing narrative for is like the show was really made with a lot of intent to have buy-in, at least from the outside looking in, obviously. But from things I've seen, people seem who are behind the show do actually seem to really know and be invested in the lore behind Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's actual, his writings, right? And it seems like there is a competing narrative here for they made a show specifically for people who are familiar with the books. But they also had to take liberties with this show because they didn't have the rights to the Silmarillion. They didn't have the rights to
So
all of his books. They didn't have the rights to all of his writings. They only had the rights to the appendices.
why don't they have the rights like, this is I was discussing with somebody I work with this week. This whole piecemeal thing that they're trying to do with this series is very strange to me. Like, it says that they have the rights to Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and something else, but they don't have the rights to the Silmarillion. Um,
Yes.
why? Why did they not, like, it's Jeff Bezos. It's the second richest man in the entire world. It's Amazon, for crying out loud. Why didn't they just be like, "Oh yeah, here's the extra 100 million to get the rights to that"? Like, I'm very confused. And why in the world did the rights holders piecemeal it out like that? The whole situation around this thing is very perplexing to me. That would be like somebody. It would have been like Lucas selling Star Wars to Disney and being like, "Yeah, you can have it all except for Chewie and Leia and R2. Those three I'm keeping, but here's the rest. Go ahead, try and build a story out of it."
Yeah,
Like,
no,
it's
yeah,
such
it's
a
weird.
weird. Yeah.
No, I was talking to somebody in the comments on another one of the videos about Lord of the Rings about this very thing. And the one of the main points that was brought up was just like, why would you even want to make a show? Especially like set aside the fact that you're spending this much money to make the show, but why would you even want to make the show if you don't have the rights to it?
Yeah.
Like if you don't have the full rights to be able to, because it limits your storytelling. Like,
Hmm.
in the end, no matter what story you have in mind, no matter what story you can crank up with as much money you wanna dump into the writers to fucking magically weave their way into making a coherent story that somehow remains true to the overall narrative and the overall lore, that's fine, but at, like, what cost? Like, what is that final product going to be? Like, because like, you're not just trying to make this for what's up, Michelle? You're not just trying to make this for random folks, like, because the problem they face here is, like I was saying, like, these people who made the show were very, very, very familiar with the source material, and I feel like they leaned heavily onto people fundamentally understanding the source material so that they like, at least as far as this season has been introduced anyway. Like, because 'cause you're 4 hours in and there's only 8 episodes total, so there's only 4 more hours in this whole season, and I'm sorry, but even as someone who is now more familiar with all of the lore going into this, I have no idea where they're going with the rest of this season in particular, because there is so much stuff they could be doing right now, and they're just not doing it. They haven't introduced any of it. One of the most annoying things is, like, and this is honestly one of the more annoying things that the Peter Jackson original trilogies did too. the Sauron stuff. Did you know? I don't know how familiar you are with the books, but did you know? Because I just kind of blew both my wife and eldest daughter's mind with this. Did you know that there is no Eye of Sauron at all? That's not even a thing.
Really?
That's not a thing in the books. In any books, there is one reference to there being an Eye of Sauron, and it's when I believe it's when Frodo is with Galadriel and he has his vision when they're talking about the ring in the books. He sees, as he's looking at the ring, he sees Sauron's eye, and it's lit with like flames, and it looks like a slit with flames in it. That is the only reference to there being an Eye of Sauron. So, like, during the entire events of the Lord of the Rings, Peter Jackson movies, and just during that entire time period in the Third Age, Sauron had a physical form. He was a dude. He could do whatever. He had a body. He lost the ability to shapeshift into what they call his fair form, but
Okay.
like the Sauron that you know from the pointy helm and the armor and all that stuff, he existed in those movies. Like he should have been there. And it's just so bizarre. Like this series, where I'm going with this is like this series is before Sauron loses his fair form. Sauron is very active as a shapeshifter during this time period with characters and places they have introduced. Like, he's at some point, I'm not gonna say when, 'cause I don't wanna spoil it for people, but, like, he's been to Numenor. Like, he's been to where this dude lives. He's been here at some point in time. Whether or not that's happened yet, I won't say, 'cause I don't wanna spoil it. But, like, he's been there as a person, and they know it's him, and they're cool with that. With Celebrimbor, I hit the wrong button again because I was showing She-Hulk stuff. But with Celebrimbor, the person that was with Elrond when they went to the Dwarvish kingdom, Sauron has been with Celebrimbor at one point, and it's like there's all these things that they could be showing happening, but I feel like they're like keeping the Sauron identity thing a secret for some reason. When in the source material, it's not a secret. It's not an M. Night Shyamalan kind of story. And now that I know all of this stuff, I honestly find it incredibly annoying because it's like they're trying to play off of this character story trope of just like, you don't know who Sauron is. That's not
Yeah.
how it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be spending time with him, understanding his motivations. They're not even doing that. And like that wasn't even something I cared about until looking into it more and understanding all of that. I was more annoyed with the other stuff. But I'm just even more annoyed now that I know the whole thing and I'm just like, dude, where are you going? It speaks more into like where are you guys going with this? Because you're not doing it. Like I don't know where you're going. There's so much you could be doing, and it's kind of blowing my mind, man. Blowing my mind. What did you
Um,
is there anything that stands out to you about all the stuff I was just jabbering on about? Is it my little like fourth mini rant?
no, the Adar. I was going to say that the Sauron is Sauron Adar is Adar Sauron, and then the non-reveal at the end of the episode was
That's another thing.
we talked about this after the first episode where I said they're like leaning way too heavily into these like cliffhanger type deals. And this one in particular was just annoying as all get out. Like, why in the world did they? I wish that they would have. I wish that they would have just done the orc saying Adar's coming or whatever, or Adar wants him or something, and then cut to black and end the episode there. But for them to then cut to Adar, but keep his face blurred and
Dude,
like,
the
oh,
episode was named Adar,
yeah, it was
and they
just
didn't
so.
even reveal Adar. And
I,
and and not to spoil anything because genuinely, I don't know where they're going with this, but that was Adar was not one of Sauron's personas. So Whether or not they're gonna make that Sauron, I have no idea. So that's not really a spoiler. Just in the books, he didn't have that persona. He was never referred to as Adar. They showed the glove that looked very much like a glove a Sauron-esque figure would wear, so they could make him Sauron. Whether or not he is beyond the source material at this point.
Yeah, I
So
I
I have no idea.
yeah, so that was that kind of non-reveal at the end, like that. It's just a weird way of doing it. It was, I thought it was very weird to have the camera go blurry all of a sudden. Like, what are we? Are we looking through the eyes of somebody that has been has bad vision? Is that what the camera's doing at that point? Otherwise, it's an intentional, like, I don't know. It was just a weird way of doing it. To me, it was very jarring. It was very weird, and
No,
it
it was
didn't.
exactly as you said last week when we watched the first episodes. You said they were leaving cliffhangers for the sake of leaving cliffhangers.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah,
exactly what that was. It was not they have an entire episode named Adar, and you're not even introduced to the character.
yeah.
Like, it's like, so who's Adar? And this just speaks to the whole problem with the show is that they're just not telling you what the hell the story is. We're
Hmm.
3 hours in. I'm thinking of She-Hulk's 4 episodes. We only have 3 episodes of Lord of the Rings at this point, or Rings of Power. But we're still 3 hours into an 8-hour series.
Hmm.
We're nearly halfway there. So it's like, how are you gonna wrap this up and explain everything that you've already introduced, which you haven't even explained it all yet? It's just
Yeah,
so bizarre. I feel like I just don't like I from what it seems like they're doing, I'm just not a fan of the let's just do the M. Night Shyamalan twist thing because we can, when that's not how the source material was. Like, that's not even it's like they're doing I don't know who they're trying to please with that kind of storytelling because it's A, not working, but B, they again seem to have wrote this series under the impression that everybody knows what I now know. And even though I know that, I know where everything goes in the second age. And it's honestly making me more annoyed. Like, I'm actually more annoyed with the show now than I was before I looked into everything that actually happens in Tolkien's actual lore. Just because of how they're portraying everything and how they're just the way the story's going. Because it's just I don't they're not making the characters interesting, they're not really focusing on the things that were, I don't know, important. It's
it's
really
it's
bizarre.
it's disappointing to hear that somebody that you're doing your homework and you're finding out more about the lore, and that it's making it even harder for you to enjoy the show, because I was really hoping that maybe I just didn't get it because I wasn't invested, but that somebody who really was invested would be able to enjoy it more, because you would have more of the inside knowledge and be able to piece some stuff together in this slow play of the story, like you were saying, like, we don't know what it's about, but like, maybe if you were more invested in it, you could see where they were going, you could see the
It's
breadcrumbs that
worse.
they were. Okay.
I'm
That's
actually like I
that's
actually get
disappointing.
it is because I actually get why, like, there are people who are hating on it so much now. Like, I actually and I normally, like, I don't like we were just saying with the She-Hulk thing, like, I don't know why people are hating on this. Like, just if you don't like it, just move on. But,
Yeah.
like, after you know everything that, like, the way it was written with this, because it actually is cool, right? Like, this I told you before, like, I always say it's an unfair comparison for Game of Thrones and Lord of the Rings because they're just entirely different. They're just, especially, I can firmly say that after doing my homework, as you said, like, I know what's going on in both worlds pretty well. Let's put it that way. I didn't read all of the books myself, but I've had people explain everything from the books in a very detailed way, right? I did read all of Game of Thrones, though. Don't get at me with that shit. I love that. I love a Song of Ice and Fire series. George finished the fucking books. But I could totally see, like, dude, if because that's one of the things that's honestly one of the reasons Game of Thrones actually worked for as long as it did, because it was really true. That's one of the reasons. I was talking to that dude in the comment section. He one of these people, I forget which one it was. There were a couple people I was talking to because I made the comment that after doing a lot of my homework here, like even the Peter Jackson movies, like I told you, there is no Eye of Sauron, right? Like that's not a thing. There is no giant eye on top of a castle looking. That's not a thing in any way, shape, or form. No pun intended. But I made the comment like, damn, even after looking at this, we're looking more into the Tolkien actual, like what he wrote. Those Peter Jackson films, as good as they are as movies, there is so much different. Like it is remarkably different than the actual source material. And I'm not just talking about Tom Bombadil. I feel like everyone always wants to talk about Tom Bombadil. Tom Bombadil aside, there is so much that is different between the Lord of the Rings books and the Lord of the Rings movies. And it kind of blew my mind as to like how well received those films were because it was so different. And the difference between those movies and this series is that even though they're so different, like despite their differences, like Peter Jackson stayed very, at least with Lord of the Rings, not with the Hobbit. Okay, that's a bit of a stretch, but at least with Lord of the Rings, they stayed true to the actual like fundamental story. Like those movies are the absolute basics. Like they don't explain what the Maiar are. They like when that's what like Gandalf and Sauron and all they don't even I feel like they don't even mention the name Maiar in those movies. They don't mention Eru. They don't mention anything about like why the things that are happening on screen are actually happening. But the things they do show you in those movies, when you go back and if you know everything else, you're like, okay, I get what you're doing here, Peter Jackson. This all makes sense. Like, yes, like you might not have to, you're not explaining why these events are happening, but everything you are doing does in fact make sense, right? Like that's kind of how those movies were.
Yeah.
With this, you're really not getting any of that. Like you're just not, unfortunately. Like, and that's literally as someone who didn't really know up until this episode. Actually, more so after this episode. After this episode, I was watching even more stuff explaining the books and everything, and holy shit, it gave me a big because when I first watched this episode to actually talk about the episode itself, this was probably minus the horse scene, the best episode yet. Like, and for all intents and purposes. Like, if they would have launched with this kind of episode and every episode was more like this episode, I think it probably would be more received. It would be received a lot better. But man, it's just so different.
I mean, but based upon that, it sounds like you think that because I thought we both kind of agreed that the second episode was better than the first, and this one, if this one was the best one for you
They
so
are
far,
getting better.
then they've all gotten better, which is I guess a good sign. I personally felt like the second one for me worked better than this one.
It
But
did.
I think the reason I like the second one better than this most recent one was because I felt
Elrond.
like it ended very strongly.
It was
Um,
Elrond. I
is
thought
that
you were
what
gonna.
it is?
I thought you were gonna say it was because it was Elrond. Like
Oh,
Elrond so far has been the strongest character.
yeah.
He's the only character that like up until Isildur's dad, like Elronier, I can't remember his name. But like up until him in this episode, Elrond was really the only relatable character. He was the only character you kind of got like his motivations. He was humanized. He went and saw his friend, his dwarf friend, and realized how shitty of a friend he was.
Yep.
Like so, like you connected with him. You connected with the dwarf, and like and It was funny because I don't know if you remember this, but I was talking to you about a scene that I saw prior to the actual release of the first 2 episodes. I saw a scene that they released from, the series, and it was that scene with Elrond and the why am I blanking on the dwarf's name? He's got the same Durin, I think, yeah, Durin, Prince Durin,
That sounds
I think
right.
that's him. Either way, because there's like 4 of them, they just keep naming their kids Durin, so, like, this is, like, Durin the 4th or whatever, and then, like, Durin Durin was killed by the Balrog that killed, or that they saw in Lord of the Rings. I think it was Durin the 6th that ends up getting killed by the Balrog in Lord of the Rings. I can't remember. Nevertheless, that scene, out of context, with Elrond and Durin smashing the rocks, was the dumbest scene in the world, because they just showed them smashing rocks.
Mm,
They didn't show Elrond saying that he's invoking the right of insert name, I forget what it was, but they didn't show any of that. They didn't show him walking up to the door with Celebrimbor. They didn't show any of that. They just showed this scene of him walking through and seeing the glory of their freaking kingdom. I can't remember the name of that either. And then they just show him smashing the rocks. I'm just like, dude, this is just kind of stupid. Like,
mhm,
why am I interested in this? But then when you see everything in context, you're like, "Oh, this is really good." Like, you get everything. You get the characters, you get their dynamics, you get why the rock scene was important, right? Because it showed more like Durin was fucking pissed off at Elrond because X amount of years have gone by, and he wants him exiled. So he wanted him to have to invoke that right of it doing that little battle there so that he wouldn't have to fucking see him again. And then they
mhm.
got to talk about it, and, like, that's all good. You haven't gotten anything like that with anybody else other than Isildur's dad at this point. And that it's like little things like that is why I feel like the show isn't really working for people who don't read the books. Because that's how I felt before I knew a lot of the stuff that was supposed to happen. Now I don't think it works for like a lot of different reasons. But like it's like now it's more reasons why it's like, I get why people were kind of I know a lot of people were being stupid, kind of like with like She-Hulk and, like, oh, they're making men look stupid just because, oh, God forbid, they made black people elves, like, ooh, like, nah, like, the elf thing doesn't matter. They've been around since he never said whether or not they what color their skin, that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That's irrelevant to the story. But, like, this stuff, come on, man. Like, it could be so good. There could be a lot of stuff, and I was not saying that 3 weeks ago. I was not saying that there could be a lot of good stuff, but there could be a lot of good stuff, especially with how much money they're dumping into the show. Like, I don't know. I feel like I've been ranting again.
No, no, I agree that it has, the things that people don't haven't liked about it are kind of, I don't know, inconsequential, I think, to as far as the story goes. Like, people are focusing on the wrong things. Um,
Michelle,
does
I
this
gotta say, I am not disappointed in Game of Thrones because I've read all those books and I know where those are going. And
Yeah,
House of the Dragon
go check
Dragon's good.
go check out our latest, House of the Dragon review. I think we both, were pretty positive about that episode.
Yeah, the latest, I mean, you could be I
Uh,
totally buy anybody being disappointed with the end of the original Game of Thrones series. Those last 2
oh, yeah.
seasons, very lackluster. But everything I kinda mentioned it before, one of the reasons a lot of the book readers especially were enjoying the Game of Thrones series because it was a very true adaptation. That show got bad literally when they ran out of books.
Yeah.
You can literally follow the point up until when they ran out of books. That's when I got nervous because I had read the books, and that's when it got bad.
Yeah.
That's what happened. That's the weird thing about this show is, like, all the books are written, but they don't have the rights to the books. So they can't even really do that stuff.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. nevertheless.
Well, I mean, everybody, and I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's why we're doing a show where we're talking about different shows that we like, or at least want to like, or at least interested in, is because everybody has their own opinion on this stuff. I mean, and it's not that anybody's one opinion is correct and one's wrong. It's just it's how it affects you and how it. I think one of the
Yes,
things
for
that
sure.
I enjoy talking about, reason I enjoy doing this show with you, Rob, is because you bring a perspective to it that I'm never going to have. I bring a perspective you don't have. Like, and then we, through talking with people about stuff, you kind of gain some insight as to why, and a point of view that maybe would help you like something more, or at least reaffirm why, make you feel like you're not alone or crazy for thinking you don't like something for some reason. So yeah, I mean, it's all talking about it, I think is fun, and I think it also is good in a way because it brings people to a better understanding of, rather than the quick, 180 characters of Twitter. This sucks because sucks. This thing is sucky. You know,
Wow.
you
Well,
get a little more.
that's the thing a lot of times anymore, at least what the way I perceive a lot of fandom, and it's not just limited to Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones or Marvel, it's everything. It's like if you have a different opinion about something, it's somehow a personal attack if it differs from their opinion. Like if you like Lord of the Rings and then I come out here and I say I or Rings of Power. No, we won't say Lord of the Rings. But if you like Lord of or Rings of Power, I'm gonna keep saying it, and then I don't like Rings of Power, it's a personal attack on you now. Like your intelligence has been insulted and you have to defend yourself as to why you like I like it and it's good because of this and that and XYZ and oh my god. And it's just like, dude, you can like it. I want you to like it. That's great. I'm not saying you're wrong if you like something. And I feel like everybody takes everything like that as a personal attack anymore. It's like if someone has a difference of opinion, there is no civil discourse about, well, why did you like it? I'd like to know why you like it because I could name a million things of why I don't like it, but why did you like it? That's gone. No one does that
Mhm.
anymore. It's just like,
Yeah,
if you like it, you're wrong because it's bad. And I said it's bad, so it is bad because I'm right. And if you say that if you like it, then I'm wrong. So that can't happen. And it's like, that's just what the world is now. And it's like, no, you can like something and someone else could not like it. And you'll still wake up in the morning and you will still go eat breakfast and you'll just do your thing. Does not affect you in any way. Like,
yeah,
what Joe Schmo says about it should not make you wanna make 12 YouTube videos about how you're wrong and, like, they're wrong and you're right, and, like, oh my god, like, just let people like what they like, it doesn't affect you in any way, like, someone can like something, what's the matter? Like,
yeah.
I hope people like that's what I said in, like, another video, it was, like, before the show even came out, I think, like, I want Lord of the Rings to be good because then more people will get into like Lord of the Rings and maybe they'll go read the books and maybe they'll like those and then maybe they'll just like high fantasy stuff more and then maybe they'll like Game of Thrones and then Game of Thrones will just be more well liked and then we'll get more Game of Thrones. Like who knows? Like and vice versa. Like when something's bad, it's just universally bad, we'll just never get any more of it, and that's kinda
Mhm.
sad, because it's all about dollar signs and comments and likes and whatever. Kind of annoying.
Perspective wise too. Like, if you're under the age of what, 30, if you're under the age of 30, like you don't know the days where like genre stories just weren't told. Back in the day, you had basically what, four types of movies. You had romantic comedies, you had action movies,
Yep.
you had horror movies, and dramas. And I think those were kind of it. You had four different types of movies, and that was it. You didn't have I guess you had some science fiction. You had Star Wars, you had Star Trek, but not nearly the nearly the breadth of genre films that you do now. So Definitely some perspective on that. Like I would never want to see this stuff go away. I would never want people to stop trying to make things because I know what it was like when you were only getting one Michael Keaton Batman film every 4 years, and that was it for superhero films. Like that was awful.
Well, and
And
even
then
when they
when
came out, they were always that's like the weird thing too, is like Keaton's Batman is not really what Batman was at the time,
mhm.
but
No,
like
no,
it
they
was
were
like
not authentic to the
it's so
character,
weird.
but yeah, yeah.
That would
I
be
mean,
a
Chris,
good book though, by the way. I mean, that'd be an interesting book.
yeah.
Michelle's book here. I mean, I don't know what happened in that journey, but I mean, there was a little hobbit that had a good journey. You're gonna stay on brand here.
He became a
It's a very
best
important figure.
best-selling book series, and
Yeah,
yeah.
well, there
Um,
could be a good story to tell.
yeah, did it involve a ring, Michelle? Because if it
Yeah.
did, um,
You might have something there.
yeah. No, so yeah, I mean, going just kind of along with this, like I do try and find positives about these episodes, and I like you were saying, you know, like everyone has gotten better for you, and that's great. And I think that's really good. I personally like the end of it. I thought the end of it with the guy getting killed by the arrow was very good. I thought that the fight scene in the alley was entertaining too. I mean, I thought that was pretty well done. I did find it kind of, I don't know what the right word. I found it kind of jarring. The show has been fairly, I don't know what the right word, fairly timid as far as showing violence so far. And I felt like that was an intentional thing, like they were trying to make this show more accessible for a younger audience. Um, for example, when the orc gives I'm not going to know his name, but the captured elf, when he gives him his water and he says, "Here, take a drink," and like the main elf takes a drink of water and he passes it to the next elf that's been captured. And he takes a drink, he passes it to the third elf. He starts to take his drink and they cut his neck. Um, they show the slight slit start to open up where the neck's been cut, but then they cut away real quick. And when they cut back to him, he's got his hand over it, so you can kind of see some blood in the background trickling down. But it's not. If that had been done in Game of Thrones, he would have slit the neck and blood would have splurted out. And they didn't. They toned it down, and I felt like that was all that. The violence and everything that's happening on the show is intentionally being toned down. I'm guessing to reach maybe a younger audience, or at least make it accessible to more families that maybe want to watch it together. That being said, when the animal came out at the end of this episode and just started ripping through people, disemboweling people, I was like, holy crap, they're not holding back right there. There was also the scene where he broke the guy's arm, he put it up against the wall and then
Oh,
snapped
yeah,
the arm.
Halbrand, yeah.
Halbrand, I thought that scene was pretty intense as far as the violence goes. So it felt very uneven. Those two, when you juxtapose the scene with the guy getting his neck slit, and it's just a very subtle opening, and then they downplay it very much, and then later on in the episode you have a guy literally break it. Now, to be fair, he didn't break his arm and the bone didn't pop out and blood splurt out. I guess it
True.
was toned down that way, but then you did have the animal at the end disembowel people and just chomping on people. So that was interesting. I guess looking back on it, I guess you can still consider those, they could have amped the violence up even more in those scenes I am thinking that I'm referencing, but, so yeah.
I think I saw people I don't know if they were kinda talking, like, in a shitty way towards Rings of Power for what you're talking about, or if they were kinda caught off guard by how much violence they showed in general, because the Tolkien books, they are not graphic like that. Like,
Yeah,
he sets up a lot of things, and it's left very ambiguous and everything. It's kinda like what I was saying, but, like, on another edition of one of these shows where, like, I prefer Game of Thrones because the world is more lived in, it feels more real. You see that kind of stuff happen, but in Lord of the Rings, everyone's like an ethereal being, and, like, they literally are ethereal beings. Like, they come from this land in the West, and like they live in between, like not everyone, but like a lot of the elves, like Galadriel, who came from the what's it, like Aldar or whatever it was, like they live in what's called both the seen and the unseen. Like that's why in that, granted this didn't actually happen in the books with this character, but nevertheless, when Frodo sees Liv Tyler's character after he had been stabbed by the Witch King's sword and was being like poisoned essentially in the original film, the first one, when he sees Liv Tyler's character walking up to him, he's like blinded by all this light. And that's because that's what like elves that are from the original land where we saw Galadriel and her brother from in the beginning of this series, that's what they look like in the realm in between Middle Earth and like not Middle Earth. It's called the seen
Yeah.
and the unseen is what he called it. Granted, they don't explain that in the movies. They don't explain that in the books, or no, they don't explain that in the show. They don't explain it in the movies. It's only explained in the books. So like, you don't really get that stuff. But like, that inherently is kind of what I think the problem with the show is, right? Like, there's all these things that like they're they happen, but then like they're not really supposed to happen that way in like the source material, but the show is leaning really heavily into like people having this knowledge of the source material, it seems, but it's not really following the source material. Like, it's a really weird thing. It's I can't even really equate it to anything because
But
it's like having a Superman movie, but like he's Superman, but he's not Superman, and he's not from Krypton. But like it's all kind of the same thing, but like it's all different, right?
aren't they kind of making up their own story about the Second Age? I mean, aren't they like I understand that the Second Age story is out there and exists, but because they don't have the rights to the specific version, aren't they kind of playing aren't they trying to make their own version of the I don't know.
That's
Somebody
what we
so
don't. That's the problem is we don't know.
one of the articles because I was trying to talk to somebody at work about it and we were talking about the Silmarillion and how they don't have access to that because they don't have the rights to it. And I looked it up and like I feel like one of the things I read said that ultimately this show is basically just a very expensive fan fiction.
It
That
kind of
because
is.
they don't have rights to all the specific things that they need that you would need rights to actually tell this story, ultimately what we're getting is a fanfic
Yeah.
of it.
Well,
So
that's like kind of what I was telling you when we were talking about it last week. I think I said like one of the things with the stranger, right? We don't know who that is. That didn't really happen at all to begin with, right? So that whole thing is just like this new weird thing, yeah? And one of the things they could do with that is say that, oh, that's Gandalf. But Gandalf isn't supposed to be on Middle Earth right now. He's not there till the Third Age. Like, he's just literally not supposed to be here in the Second Age, period. Full stop. Doesn't exist right now. He exists over in the West, which is where everyone actually came from, right? But you got to understand if you don't, again, they don't explain this in the movies or in the show or anything, but like, when Frodo and Gandalf and all them at the end of the movie, they go off in the boat and they go off into the big sunset, and you saw the sunset here when Galadriel was supposed to be on the boat or whatever, and they were supposed to go there to
yeah,
the realm they came from, right? Like, that's not just across the ocean. It's like that's literally like essentially through space time. That's not supposed to, it's an inaccessible path that you have to take that boat to get back to like an ethereal homeland.
yeah. They're
And
like
the
ascending. They're ascending
yeah,
to a different plane of
right, yeah.
existence or
It's
something.
not
Yeah,
just taking a boat and you can't just go there. There's one path,
sure.
and it's that boat, and it doesn't come every Sunday. Like, that's it, because back in it was either the end of the first stage, it was the end of the first stage when it was in the middle of the second age, I think it was. But like when at some point when Sauron is supposed to be doing what he's doing right now, so maybe it's the beginning of the second age, I can't remember. Actually, no, I think it isn't the second. It isn't the second age because that hasn't happened yet. This is why I didn't want to read the books. It's very fucking long and convoluted. But nevertheless, they can't just take the boat back anymore because Eru, the god of this world, when some bad shit was going down, he just wasn't going to let that happen essentially. And all of a sudden, boom, the place got blown up. You can't get over there anymore. The earth used to be flat, now it's round. Yeah, it sounds weird, I know, but like you gotta just it's hard for me to explain it because I don't know full details. But like that's all was happening, and I think one of the problems here with this too is I think that actually is supposed to be happening right now in this age, because I think that happens when like these Numenorians that you get introduced to. Pretty sure. I might be confusing timelines. This might have been with the Morgoth stuff. I don't remember. There's a lot to it, man. I don't know. Like there's a lot to it. But nevertheless, I don't even remember where I was going with this. But either way, there's just I was telling when I was
You're
talking to a couple people, there's just so much potential with this show. It's now that I know so much about it, it's kind of driving me crazy in a lot of ways.
yeah.
Like I
Well,
don't
that's I
know.
mean, like I said, it's unfortunate. I mean, my best comparison was the whole, like, if Lucas had only sold like, after knowing how the rights were divided up and what they do have access to and what they don't have access to, it's very strange, and it's very interesting that they decided to go ahead and do this show without full access to everything. Well, why in the world, like, Disney, I'm sure if George Lucas had gone to Disney and said, "You can have everything but the Empire," they would be like, "Well, no, we that's an essential part of it," or like, "You can
We'll
have."
just call it the first order.
Yeah, there you go. Or
No,
you can
that's
have.
that was my point. Yeah, that was my point. That's what they could just change small events, right? Yeah, okay. Now
Yeah,
I remember where I was going. Like, yeah, now you throw Gandalf into this thing, and like now you can kind of tell the same story, but you're changing the events a little bit because the people who are there is different. And I feel like that's maybe what they're trying to do, but they're doing it in a really shitty way. Because I feel like the thing that they're excluding from this, and I honestly, in some ways, I think they're doing this because of the Peter Jackson films, they're hiding Sauron because Sauron was hidden in those movies. You didn't know what Sauron was doing. He was left as this ambiguous eye that wasn't in the books. Everyone thought it was fine though, because during that time period in the books, he wasn't as active in the third age as he is in the second age. Like with where they're at right now, like you should see Sauron in physical form very soon with
mm,
how they're accelerating the storyline, right? So I don't know if they're just trying to do something to continue the Peter Jackson theme of keeping Sauron this ambiguous, you don't know what he's doing, and that's why you have the Aggar thing or whatever. It's like, "Oh, is that supposed to be Sauron?" And then half the people out there think that Halbrand is Sauron, and like some people think the Stranger is Sauron, and it's like I think that is one of the just titular failings of the show is that they're not leaning into the fact that like you could just be following Sauron right now. You know that, right? Like you could just do that. Like you could be having us
knowing
know
else, yeah.
what he's doing so that we actually give a shit about what happens to this world
That's
because we
hilarious.
don't.
That's hilarious that people have these theories out there because I had never even once for a second considered that any of these other characters that we've been introduced so far are
Oh yeah,
Sauron.
dude.
I've
Yeah.
been going along all the whole time of just assuming, okay, we just not they're just not going to show Sauron. Sauron's going to be it's they're taking the approach of less is more with him. Like, we're not going to show him. He's just going to be this presence that hangs over the
Yeah.
entire series that you're never going to get to see.
And that's a failing of the show because that's not this story. That's just not like I said, in the books, he is never just an eye to begin with. So like that's all wrong. And like I feel like that's kind of the like one of the failings of the show because I think they're trying to do that. Like we could find out who Sauron is next week. I have no idea. But it seems like they're trying to appeal to that aspect of Sauron that Peter Jackson introduced in those films to where you never got like the only time you saw him in any way, shape, or form, let me remind you, was at the very beginning of the first film when they had the flashback to the end of the Second Age, right? You saw him
Mhm.
in his armor, you saw Isildur cut his little finger off, and he got the ring, and you move on. Never see him again. He's only an eye after that, right? We saw Sauron in the first episode of this. After they
Mhm.
killed Morgoth, there was one shot of him standing there. It was a really cool shot. He was like 12 feet tall. There he was.
Yep.
And I feel like they're doing the same thing. They're just setting it up that like Sauron's here, but we're not going to tell you where he is because they're trying to appeal to the aspect of the fans that they know only watch the movies. And I
Mhm.
get that. But the disconnect is the fact that like it actually worked for the third age, which is where those movies took place because he he didn't actually do anything in physical form because he lost his what they call his fair form at that time because he lost it in the second age. When the big thing happens where the world gets reformed and it's no longer flat and it becomes a circle and become like our world, it's not flat.
Wait, what?
That's when he loses. Yeah, I know, right? It's mind blowing. Honestly, I thought that was the kind
But
of the funniest
there's still
thing.
hope, right? It might get reformed at some
No, like ironically, I legit thought like as I thought the most ridiculous thing, and this is a world like I'm talking about the Tolkien lore where all this other crazy weird shit happens. I thought the most ridiculous thing that he wrote was that this world was flat at some point. I'm not even kidding. When I found out that the initial aspect of this shit was like it was flat, 'cause that took me out of it more than Morgoth, more than the Balrogs, more than Sauron, more than dragons. Like when all like I'm just like I can buy into all of that. You're gonna try to tell me you said this shit was flat, dude? Like that
How
just
does that
doesn't
work?
make any sense. But like I guess when you go back and read about like how all this like all of Middle Earth and the world that they were on and whatever was literally created because of like songs, literally described as the songs. Like it gets even weirder. Like, you know, I don't it's just weird.
Yeah.
But again, highly recommend anybody out there go watch Nerd of the Rings because he does a really good job of breaking the stuff down in a very easy to follow way. And it's very good. I like it a lot. Very simple. And if you like Game of Thrones, another other than us, obviously, you go and watch Nerd of the Rings after you listen to me stumble my way through the Tolkien lore, and then you go watch that, and then you're like, oh, Rob did know what he was talking about. I get it. Like he didn't say all this, but he knew what he was talking about. But then if you like Game of Thrones, another channel I always loved watching back in my heyday and still now that House of the Dragon is up, go watch Alt Shift X because they do a great job at the game. They're just like a game. You should watch. Did I tell you about them? I think I sent
You
you
did.
a
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We talked about
I
last.
love Alt Shift X videos, man. Even though I know the lore of everything that happens in Game of Thrones, I still like aside from Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, obviously. But I love watching Alt Shift X and his videos. Like it's just like a nice even if you know what's gonna happen, it's just a nice, like, little like, yes, it's almost like it's like a confirmation bias. You kinda get to pull the bias part away, and you're like, "Aha, you're on the same page as me. Yes. You know what you're talking about. Yes." It was good. Yeah, I don't know, though. I don't want it to sit here. I feel like I've just been ranting about, like, how bad the show is, but there's a lot of stuff I do like about it because I think this is also a detractor, but I think we might be actually getting to where the point of this series is. But I feel like in a lot of ways it might be kind of like too late for a lot of people. Like for them to actually get what's going on. Because like I think in the next couple episodes, me kind of knowing what the overarching destination is for the 4 or 5 season series they're planning, will be revealed will likely be within the next 2 episodes, if not by the end of the series, which I think might lose a lot of people who don't know what the hell's happening, right? You know?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if Amazon was pretty gung ho about releasing their numbers um about viewers for the first weekend. So it'll be interesting if they do that again. Um, I think you'll be able to see how much the show's held its viewership. If they don't say anything about viewers, I think that might be a good indicator that they didn't hold as many as they had hoped.
Yeah. It's such a bizarre thing. Like I said, like, 'cause there's articles too, like, about, like, how the writers have, like, gone in to say that, like, because of them only having the rights of the appendices, that it's like, no matter what they do, they really wanna stay true to the story and do all these things, but then it's like, yes, but if you don't have the rights, how can you? And
Yeah.
that's kinda like the disconnect I have. It's like, man, why would you even if you don't have the rights, why are you trying to, like, it's a big money dump to try to tell, like, us essentially, like you said, like a borderline fan fiction, really.
Hmm.
And it's like, you just wanna make the best show possible, like, I don't know, so I hope it's good. Like, I'm all for adaptation. Like, we were talking about with Marvel, it's like, their stories aren't one-to-one reinventions of or one-to-one copies of what happened in the comics. They tell their own story. So I support that. It's just when it's happening in a way where it's like they just haven't told us where this show is going, so on a fundamental level, I'm just kinda confused from a storytelling standpoint. Because like, everything that's been on screen, I don't disagree with, it's just the way it's happening is just so bizarre. Because, again, now I have the gift of foresight, so I'm, like, kinda more annoyed than I was a week ago when I didn't have the gift of foresight. You know what I mean? If you like this clip and want to be a part of the conversation, come back and join us for our live House of the Dragon after shows every Sunday around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time and 7:30 p.m. Pacific Time, immediately following the premiere of each episode on HBO Max. We're also doing live after shows and Q&As every Friday around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time with a 6:30 p.m. Pacific Time for She-Hulk, Lord of the Rings of Power, and we'll also be doing one for the Star Wars prequel series Andor when that comes out later this month. So if you like those shows, be sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you'll get notified every time that we go live. And we'll look forward to seeing you in the chat and answering your questions in our next video or live stream. Thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like the video and let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below, and we'll see you in the next one. Like and subscribe.